Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Roman Hunter. I'm a sports physiotherapist and I work on the medical committee of the National Powerlifting Association of Jamaica. Now, working with powerlifters, there are some things I'd like to highlight, some things I'd like to speak about, and one in particular is the biceps rupture. Now, the biceps rupture is an injury that is not very common. It's quite rare, actually, generally speaking, among the average population. However, it's becoming more and more frequent, more and more common among bodybuilders and powerlifters just because of improper technique. All right. Now, I'm going to speak a little bit about the anatomy of the biceps brachii. I'm not going to go too much into it and bore you with it. And then I'm going to go into the mechanism of injury, the signs and symptoms, the management of it, as well as the prevention, how to prevent it in the first place. Now, what we're looking at here is the biceps muscle. It's called biceps because it's a muscle of the arm or the humerus, which is that bone right there. And it has two heads, okay? It has a long head, which is highlighted there, and a short head. Now, the long head originates, let's spin this up a little bit here. It originates from the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, and the short head originates from the coracoid process of the scapula. That is this bone right here, this process right here. Both are inserted into the radial tuberosity of the radius and also the deep fascia of the forearm via the bicipital aponeurosis. Now, the main movements of the biceps brachii is that it performs flexion of the elbow and supination of the forearm. Now, that's important to note because when performing a deadlift with improper technique, these two movements come into play, and these two movements are key factors of why many people who perform the deadlift have biceps rupture. All right. So I'm going to go into the mechanism of injury now, and let's see. All right. So we're going to go ahead and cover the mechanism of injury for the biceps rupture during a deadlift. Now, this is very important. I'm going to clarify some things that persons may have. They have some misconceptions. I'm going to cover some of that. It won't take too long. And I'll move on from there, okay? Persons have been saying, well, boy, I've been hearing a lot with this deadlifting, and people who doing deadlifts have bicep rupture, so therefore don't do any deadlifts whatsoever. It is not good for you. You must stay away from it because the moment you start doing a deadlift, it will mess up your arm, all right? Now, that is totally false, and that is not correct. So I'm going to go ahead and clarify some things for you. First and foremost, the deadlift is a very wonderful exercise to do, okay? It's a very wonderful exercise, and it helps in many different ways, and it complements other exercises as well. Now, there are different ways to do a deadlift, different grips, right? So you have double pronated or overhand grip, double undernated or supinated grip. You have a mixed grip, where one is pronated and the other one is supinated. Additionally, you have full grip, where the thumb meets the fingers, and you also have a hook grip, okay? So the hook grips, these different grips, whether it be full or hook, it can be done double overhand, double underhand, and mixed. Whichever one is up to you, it doesn't really matter. None of these grips will increase, or none of these grips will cause you to have a biceps rupture. It is just whichever one you're comfortable with and whichever grip that you're strongest in, all right? The reason why people have biceps rupture is because of improper technique, first and foremost. Now, there are some persons who are under the impression that it's because of the stretch that you put to the biceps why you're doing it. It usually occurs in a mixed grip position with regards to the biceps rupture. It usually happens in a mixed grip position, and it usually happens on the side with the supinated grip, all right? It rarely, if any at all, happens on the side with the pronated. It always happens on the side with the supinated grip. And persons have been saying it's because it puts a lot of stress. It puts a lot of stretch on the biceps, which is not correct. Because if you think about it, the biceps is responsible for supination and flexion, all right? So when it supinates, it shortens. When it flexes, it shortens, okay? So if it is that it's primarily and only because of the stretch that you put on the biceps, then that alone will cause it to rupture, which is not correct. The next thing is that to fully stretch the biceps, you have to pronate it. If it is that the bicep shortens with supination and flexion, then it stretches with extension of the elbow and pronation of the forearm, and also remember that there's a connection up here as well, and extension of the shoulder. All right. So if it is that that was the case, then it would have happened on the side with the pronated grip when you're doing a mixed grip lift. It would have happened on the side with the pronated grip, because what happens here is that, let's say that this hand is a pronated hand, right? As you lift, it moves from flexion, it goes into neutral and into slight extension of the shoulder. And the majority of the stress and strain will be up near the shoulder area. So it would have happened in the long head area, the long head of the biceps, right? Remember what I had said, that the biceps originates, the long head originates from the supraglenoid tubercle. So it would have happened further up to the shoulder. So you'd have had the majority of the ruptures occurring at the shoulder region, which is not necessarily the case. The majority of ruptures occurs distal arm, and I'm going to explain to you why. All right, so I have the barbell here with some plates on it, with a plate on it. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and lift it. I'm using a mixed grip. Keep your eyes on the right side. All right, so the right side is the supinated side. Okay, now what happens many times when people are doing the deadlifts, especially when the weight is very heavy, you have starting position down here, and then when they're going into mid phase, when you're transitioning from mid phase into terminal extension, what happens is that if the weight is very heavy, then they're going to want to bend the elbow a little bit. So the forearm is already fixed in supination. And remember what I had said, that the bicep is a powerful supinator of the forearm. So already the biceps is under isometric contraction to hold the forearm in supination, and it is fixed with the bar. Okay? In addition to that, in order to complete the lift, many people start to flex the elbow. So they're doing like a mild or a very minimal bicep curl. But that minimal bicep curl is sufficient, is just enough to cause the rupture, which is why most often than not, many times the bicep rupture occurs distally, because that's where a lot of the tension is concentrated at, right there, because you have supination and flexion. So the person is doing like this, boom, and then you have that stretch there. So you have a little stretch, maximal tension right there, and so you have a lot of the load being isolated and concentrated distally, and then you have that boom, it ruptures. Whether it be an avulsion fracture or otherwise, it ruptures. And it usually ruptures distally, distal arm. Okay, so that is the mechanism of injury for the biceps rupture. It is for supination and flexion and extension of the shoulder. Now, the supination and extension of the shoulder are fine. Nothing is wrong with that. But the problem is, this is where the improper technique comes from. The problem is when people start to bend the elbow. It is a deadlift, meaning the elbows are to be fully extended. Okay, and you lift the weight. It is a dead lift. All right. So in order to properly perform the deadlift, the elbow has to be fully extended, and I'm going to go into that a little bit shortly. Before going to that, however, the signs and symptoms of a biceps rupture, you have localized pain and tenderness occurring in the area where the rupture is. Localized, you can pinpoint exactly where it is. You can noticeable, most times it is noticeable. You can see the bundling up of the biceps muscle. You will also see some erythema or discoloration. All right, it will look black and blue if a person with a light complexion will look black and blue. If a person is light brown or dark complexion, may look very dark in the area, and you'll have a lot of swelling, and you'll have a decrease in function, a decrease in active range of motion for supination of the forearm and flexion of the elbow. Okay, so those are the telltale signs of a bicep rupture. Putting all those things together, more than likely you have a biceps rupture. Now, what to do when do you have a biceps rupture? What to do about it? If it is that you have a bicep rupture, seek medical attention. Okay, seek medical attention and physiotherapy, right? So the physiotherapist will help you. If it is a complete rupture or an avulsion fracture, then that will require surgical intervention. All right. However, if it is probably a grade 1 or grade 2 or mild or moderate type of rupture, it still has the capacity to heal itself. So what you have to do during the time being is to rest it, you ice it, you compress it, and do gentle stretches and gentle exercises, range of motion exercises for the area. But seeking medical attention or seeking attention from the physiotherapist, they will take you through the required and recommended exercises for that type of injury. All right, so moving on. As it relates to the prevention of it, which is what I was saying from before now, going more into that now. I was saying for a deadlift, the elbow needs to be straight. Okay, so to prevent a bicep rupture from occurring, regardless of what weight that you're lifting, if you have good technique, if your technique is immaculate, if it is pristine, if it is perfect, if it is really good form, you have that neutral position of the spine, chest slightly up, you have the hips out like that, you're driving the hips back, and you're engaging you're engaging your lats, your scapulae, your thorax is nice and firm, then you will definitely stand free from getting a biceps rupture, right? Now, the first and foremost thing with regards to the elbow is that you want to engage your triceps. Why? Because it produces a reciprocal inhibition type of activity for the biceps. Once you engage your triceps, the elbows are locked out, and that's what you want. Once you engage your triceps, the elbows are locked out, you disengage the biceps, and that you can lift properly. What will also happen is that the triceps will also engage your scapulae, right? So what you want to do to have proper technique and form, and some of the ways you can also help prevent from having biceps rupture, is you work on your thoracic mobility. You work on thoracic mobility. You work on scapular mobility. You try to lock out the elbows by engaging your triceps, so you have that reciprocal inhibition going on. You're locking down the biceps. And you want to also work on your hip mobility, all right? Because if any of those areas are weak and ineffective, then your biceps are going to be doing most of the lifting, and you don't want that, all right? And also you want to work on your rotator cuff muscles that are responsible for stabilizing the scapula and also stabilizing the shoulder joint, all right? So you can lift properly. You want to make the majority of the lift come from the hip area, okay? Not from your back, not from the shoulders, not from your elbows or your biceps or your arms or forearms. No, the majority of the lift comes from the hip area, right? You want to plant your feet into the ground, keep your thighs nice and tight, knees slightly bent, and perform that lift, okay? So that's some of the ways, these are some of the ways that you can help to prevent biceps rupture from occurring. And this is the educational video. You can look out for some more coming on, and all the best. I wish you all the best in your exercise, and remember, perform a proper deadlift, focus on the technique, work on those accessory exercises to strengthen the other areas, and you'll be good to go. Have a wonderful day. I'm Roman Hunter. Blessings.